I mean, like I have Big Mark, on the podcast. Finally, honestly, it's been a minute trying to get y'all on here, but you know what? It is what it is. We're here now, and I'm just so happy to be able to now, talk with you about all of these interesting things that I know, like very much, take up our mental space and things that we be trying to figure out just as people. So yeah, I'm super excited to kind of have you on here and to like share your perspective with others and hopefully help sort of drive new experiences or points of curiosity for people. So how are you doing? How's life in the Midwest?
Good show. First, let's say thank you for bringing me on here. I am very honored. You feel me? Be doing big things, so appreciate that. But yeah, life in the Midwest. I'm really here just visiting. I've been in California working for the past like 6 months. For a company called Danaher. So that's been pretty nice. It's a big shift. I don't really like growing up in Michigan. You get used to the cold, but then you go to California and you just like, oh no, I ain't mess with that no more. You feel me? So I did not feel good when I came back and saw the snow when I got off the plane, bro.
I feel it's interesting how our bodies acclimate, but it's like being people of color, it's like we're supposed to be in warmer environments. It's just that for whatever reason, we out here in the cold, like for what?
You feel me? Yeah, my melanin love the sun, so gotta soak all that
Exactly.
up. Nature.
Exactly. How is life in Cali? Like, how is it working for Danaher, actually being an engineer for real? Like, what do you do over there, you know?
For sure. So it's pretty nice. I am in a rotational program right now. I work in manufacturing. I graduated, from U of M, Go Blue, with a degree in industrial operation engineering. So in manufacturing right now, I just got into my second rotation. It's four roles. I'm kind of like doing capacity planning, and so just kind of learning like what all like the functionality and operations kind of like go into having like a successful operation for manufacturing. And so it's very Excel based. I work on a day-to-day basis, kind of fighting fires. My last role was what we call like a DBS, didn't hear business system leader, but it's basically I was a continuous improvement engineer. So we just kind of like helped each department with whatever we need to like just further on like kind of meeting our goals in terms of our output. So, but the capacity planning I'm working on just basically like allocating materials to our lines so that way that we just like run it efficiently to meet our metrics. So it's been pretty
Interesting.
nice.
Yeah, it's super interesting, like, when you hear how other companies define engineering roles, because I feel like it is very, like, different from, like, company to company, but it's like we're all engineers and we all sort of, like, come back to this basic of, like, you're either EE, ME, chemical, IOE, but really the title in industry can be so many different things. Because really what matters is just that you have, like, this very fundamental engineering mindset, and it can be applied to, like, so many different things, which is kinda interesting because it's like, what is an engineer is such a hard then question to answer because it's like it depends on who you ask, and I think a lot of the
Mhm.
time, like even the perceptions we have about engineers and what they do can be so skewed depending again on who you ask. Because for some people, it's like, yeah, they're really doing like theoretical research. And then you have others that are really looking at systems as a whole and like making systems more efficient. And like I feel like manufacturing is one of those like things that are unseen that should be seen more, because I feel like as
Mhm.
consumers, like, of anything, like, in order to even have a thing, there needs to be a manufacturing process, but often, like, in business, like, we hide all of that because 'cause we're like, "Oh, the customers don't care," like, they don't need to know how the bread gets made, but, like, to me, I'm like, "Yeah, I wanna know," like, I wanna know the people that are involved in making that happen, like and when you were talking about, like, capacity planning, that is such a huge, like, problem in and of itself to solve because it's like, how do you determine how much stuff to make when you don't really know how many people are gonna buy? And then you
Mhm.
also don't know, like, how much is that stuff gonna be available, how much it's gonna cost, thinking about how do we even get it to the factory, to then use it and making sure the people that are using it know how to use it properly. Like, there's just so
Right.
many things that can, like, screw it up. Like, I'm curious, do you have to do a lot of Six Sigma stuff in manufacturing because a lot of it is just like understanding the data of like how to improve these processes and make them more lean and agile with like the changes of like the American economy and supply chain constraints and all that?
Yeah, Six Sigma is a huge portion, especially if you want to be able to handle like all of the like the factors going into having a smooth operation. And when you talked about like, thinking about how do we get materials, and then like how do we efficiently use those materials, right? You're looking at like the efficiency of your machines, you're looking at the efficiency of the people, right? A portion of like an engineer could essentially like be a human factors engineer, right? So you're not even working with technology, but you're just working with people, in the facility. So the way we can have like the best operation. So, like I said, like you're always taking in data from all different type of angles, right? And just taking a holistic picture of, okay, how do everything contribute to us, like, running efficiently. So I would say I did a lot of Six Sigma, like lean manufacturing practices for my role for sure.
I feel it. I feel it. Like I had to take it for just like I was like, oh, I want to learn. I was like, oh, they're giving
Hmm.
trainings. Let me do it. And then I was like, oh my god, like oh, two
Yeah.
weeks intensive course of
That
just
was
like
steep.
statistics. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
why, Lord, why?
Yeah. It's super data driven. It's super data driven.
I know, and it's interesting because it's like I feel like in college they don't emphasize data enough and like how much data like engineers are really creating like in order to really allow us to understand these systems. And I feel like that's kind of our bottleneck right now in like all industries is like how do we handle all of this information that we're making and actually like figure out what is the story here, something that's more intuitive to like how humans understand things. Because numbers are cool, but I'll be real, like looking at them Excel sheets is just a pain in the head. Like I hate to do it. I hate to have to process data, but it's like once it's processed and it's in a forum that like can then allow you to look at trends and look at like much more meaningful, like analysis across different product lines, across different just like suppliers. You can start to notice things that are like, oh my God, like this is our issue right here. It's this,
Hmm.
vendor on this line that's not changing the tool quick enough, that's resulting in these yield results that are impacting how much money we can make because therefore we're now wasting all of these prototypes or bills because well the line wasn't doing what it was supposed to. And these are all things that people don't see that like contribute
Yeah.
to waste, and it all costs money. And it's just like I don't know, it blows my mind sometimes how much like things cost to engineer, and then you go to the store and they're like, oh, it's $1,000, but or like a couple grand for like big systems that Danaher, I can make, or even more than that. What am I saying? A couple grand, probably thousands of dollars. So yeah, there's just so much to data that just like goes behind all of this to like really assess quality and assess like are we really hitting the bar so that we can
Right.
sell a product that is reliable, that allows our customers to build trust with us, that really like makes this something that is like worth the price tag that we're asking customers. And I don't know, like all of it comes down to like compliance documents and
Hmm.
policies. And I
Hmm.
feel like these are all things that you don't, at least like I wasn't super aware of, in college. But then, when they talk about, oh, like you should join IEEE or join these things, I'm like, oh, I get it now. Cause these are the people that are making all of the standards that dictate how we're supposed to go about building things so that
Yeah.
it, aligns with like what's best for society, at least as of today, with what we know. But
Hmm.
it's too much. It's too much.
Yeah, definitely unbearable. But that's why it's just like it's great to be able to like work in a team, right? Because that's what it takes. It takes a lot of effort from
Exactly.
everybody. So,
I know, like that tribe, which is like you need it. Like it's impossible to do it all by yourself. And like that's that thing, the beauty of engineering is like working on a team. And I'm curious, like going into career versus like, when you first were thinking about being an engineer, what even like got you interested in this sort of like field of like manifestation?
mhm.
Because to me that's what I think of engineering as. It's like a means of implementing ideas and creating, taking something that's a vision and actually bringing it into the real world. Yeah, what sort of sparked that curiosity for you?
All right. So it's like kind of growing up, I would say I was like very like what they say like, in the community, like this child was gifted in a sense, right? And I always had that app for technology, kind of like exploring science and going to career fairs or like science fairs and learning the code and that nature. And that's just like from being like little and always like all throughout my education and life. And so the essential purpose for me getting into it was to make an impact, right? And to do something to where I can utilize that curiosity and my ability to like problem solve and work with technology to kind of like make an impact on people's lives. So I wanted to be an engineer because of the fact that like I was like very much interested in like robotics. Like I was on a part of the robotics team when I was in high school. I did like my mentors growing up. They kind of put me in that path to get into STEM, right? Because they saw the potential in me. Like very high achieving student, and had a good interest in like video games and coding. So just like from going to a lot of camps and doing the stuff in after school programs, it pushed me to want to be in the field. So that's kind of like why I want to be an engineer. But prior to actually being an engineer, like I had this sense of like, okay, I just want to go and kind of like build a product or make some type of like some company or organization, right? That's like producing some very innovative. But like then getting into the field, right? It kind of it shifted. Like now I'm trying to be an engineer to do it to be an outlier, because you understand that not a lot of people who are engineers look like me, right? So I kind of want to be that face for those other people growing up to be like, hey, like engineering is cool. Engineering is something that you can do, coming from our community.
Yeah, I guess like were there a lot of people like that were practicing engineers in Michigan that you could talk to kind of like understand what the actual experience of an engineer is? Because at least for me growing up, like I always sort of had like you said, this idea of an engineer, which is someone that makes products that can really impact people. And it was sort of from this like the sci-fi influence of like Marvel and like, Tony Stark and just like the work that he did was like, "Oh my god, that's engineering. I want to do that. That looks super cool." But I never really had someone that was like actually doing it in my, backyard that I could be like, "Hey, like can you actually tell me what the day in the life is and like what does it actually mean to be in a field of engineering?" Which I
Mhm.
think isn't really captured so much, in the movies, but for
Yeah.
good reason. So
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because like I did see like Iron Man and all these other heroes or people that was like super duper like tech geeks and they were just doing this extraordinary stuff. But and in my community, so I was born in Flint and I was raised in Saginaw, Michigan. There really wasn't too many people that could like like tell me about like what engineering really was or take me through their life as an engineer. And I would say like those communities are under resourced, so we didn't even really have too many programs to where we could get a good sense of what engineering is or like stuff in STEM, right? We kind of like were like late bloomers in that, right? Because we had to fight and do a lot to get resources to get funding in our schools to offer programs like robotics or like science olympiad programs or just extracurriculars, right? So outside of just typical sports, or like arts. So
yeah, I can imagine. And I'm curious, like, so when you decided to go to Michigan and study engineering, how is it sort of finding the resources to even make that like feasible or like make it, less of a financial burden to be able to go to such a prestigious school like that? Because I know for a lot of people, like, even pursuing a degree in engineering is just very intimidating just in the academic process of trying to even get into an engineering program. And for a lot of kids, especially, minorities, they might just feel like, that's not for me. Like engineering is not cool. Like I want to be something that's cool. I want to be, I want to have clout. I want to be someone that like, is respected. And sometimes engineers are looked at as more as like just nerdy, people that are awkward. They're very
hmm
silent. They don't really
hmm
tell you what they think. And I feel like that does engineering a disservice because engineers should be to me the loudest people in the room because they're the people that understand reality the best. And it's
hmm
unfortunate that a lot of the times like coolness isn't something that is synonymous with engineering, but it's like something that I want to really help shift that narrative because I think anybody can be an engineer. And it's really just, what you said, coming back to this place of like, are you curious about the world? Are there problems that you see in your community that you want to solve? And how can engineering just give you the tools, empower you as a person to be
right.
able to figure out how to then solve that problem, you know?
Honestly, I didn't even know of the prestige of like Michigan's engineering program before I got accepted to go there. Like, I felt like when I recollect to the high school and like the process of like applying for college, I kind of was just kind of riding this high of like I'm that person. Like it was some confidence. It wasn't arrogance, but I just like had this feeling of like I'm gonna be good no matter what. And I think about times where in one of my classes, right, I had to do essay, just like a college preparatory essay, and I didn't get like an A on my essay. I got like a B minus, and my friend Jakari got like an A on his assignment. But I ended up using that essay, and I actually got into Michigan, and he got deferred, right? So it's like, I mean, it wasn't still like arrogance, but like I still like was on this high, and then I actually received a full ride scholarship to Michigan. I attended Arthur Hill High School, and little people know Arthur Hill is actually the person that they named the Hill Auditorium after. And so our high school in Michigan had like close ties. Our football helmets even used to be the same as the Michigan Wolverine football helmets. You feel me? And so I knew that they had it set up to where we had a couple of students go to Michigan, on scholarship from every class. And it was two people who went, and me and my friend Cruz from our class. So I still like was just like on this wave, and I was just like going with the flow, and I'm like, oh snap! And one day I got a letter in the mail like, hey, you got this Hale scholarship, right? And there was a new scholarship for people who came in like low income, like impoverished cities, and schools that weren't necessarily like prestige. So I mean, I got that, and I got a full ride, and I just kept going like with the flow, and it was thanks to my principal, Mr. Foldy. Like he had access, or he went and he was studying. He did his like graduate, what is it called, dissertation
Mm.
on kind of like uh, getting resources to those communities, like the public schools. And he was the one that introduced me to like basically the robotics program. He introduced me to IB, like international baccalaureate programs, and just trying to like make sure I had a resume to be a top competitor to get into Michigan, right? And so thanks to him, he like kind of put me on the track to go there. And so
That's
he really was the
awesome.
one to like lay down the foundation, bring resources to the school, and it had them to me to utilize to and better myself to be able to like get a full ride to go to Michigan. So
That's so awesome. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it's so interesting like when you have communities that really are trying to build and create opportunities for exposure. I think it's really interesting because then that really shapes like where we find our passions, and like when we have that support, it makes it easier for us to kind of go out and achieve our dreams. And that's so incredible. I had no idea that Arthur Hill was Hill Auditorium.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
so interesting. I guess, like, how was it then when you came to Michigan and you recognize, like, "Oh, crap, like, okay, like, they're not kidding. This is, like, a legit engineering program, like, these people are not playing games, like, they have lingo like weeder classes, that its job is to get rid of students, because it's all about leaders and the best." And to me, like, I don't know, when I came to Michigan, it was really a shock, just from
It
the
was.
academic, like, just competitive nature, but even just like the way that the teachers were, like, I expected at least more of them to be very supportive and making sure that everybody understood the material, but really it was just like, I'm gonna teach this, you either get it or you don't, and if you don't, you get cut.
Yeah,
That just
it
means you
was.
weren't good enough, and
It
that's
was
sort
some
of
real
like the
shit.
lens that they put at of like, well, if you're struggling, that's your fault. You don't deserve to be here and you should figure it out. And we're not really gonna do much else other than like, well, you should go to office hours and you should talk to the GSI. But not necessarily works with how everybody learns. And for me it really, like, when you come in with that, like, I'm the shit, and then you get smacked in the face with like, well, you're barely passing the curve, it
Yeah,
kind of just like humbles the ego like real quick of like, oh my god, like, am I the shit? Like, why am I even here? Like, oh my god, like, this is not what I thought. Like, Tony Stark, like, is this what you were going through, bro? Because I didn't see that in the movie. I'm
right, right,
curious,
right.
yeah, like, how was the reality of like becoming an engineer, after kind of like having this um, veil built up of like, yeah, like, I can do this. This is for me. But then when you see the reality of what it takes, it's like, oof, oof.
Man. So it was a huge reality check, and it was like one of the craziest experiences that happened to me because, so like I said, growing up, I was in a small pool of people, and like I was a very top performer. So right, I'm thinking like you said, I'm this shit, like I'm that person. You feel me? Can't nobody mess with me. You feel me? 4.0 student, woo woo. I'm doing all these extracurriculars,
Exactly, gang,
and then you
gang.
go to Michigan. You feel me? You go to Michigan, everybody did that. And like everybody was like the class president, top of the class, right? They come in here. Some people had their own businesses coming in, right? Some people they had their own like patents for products coming in. Like, oh, they did this. Like, wow. Some people knew how to code, right? And you
Yeah,
go,
been doing research and shit since high
you feel
school. I
me,
was like finding molecules, and I was like, oh, I didn't even
man.
know lab was a thing, but okay.
Some people in Forbes 30 under 30. You feel me? Like they freshmen in college and you already on Forbes this type thing. And so it was a huge reality check. And like I kind of like you said, went through that ego, like kind of like destroyed my ego, you know. And it put me in my place. Like I got knocked off my high horse, to where like, hey, you know, like you're really not that person in comparison, right? And it really made me learn about like comparing isn't really the best thing to do, right? So you gotta, it made me narrow my focus on to like really appreciate my story, appreciate my path, and to kind of like lock in. Okay, all right. So what? Now that I'm here, that my education is really in my hands. How I do, how I perform is in my hands, right? And I would say like the curriculum in like high school, like or like in like just like K through 12, like education was very easy. Like I really didn't have to study. It was very like here's 1 plus 1. How do you get to 1 plus 1, right? But when you get to college, it's not just like 1 plus 1, right? It's more like conceptual and theoretic based. So you got to really like use your brain.
They're like, yeah, we taught you derivatives. Now apply it to this like abstract ass problem you've never heard of about some random thing you didn't even care about, but now you gotta
Right.
apply the thing. And I'm just like, oh my God. What was
Yeah, it's a
given again? I don't remember.
you feel me? It's a whole new way of thinking. So it was a good learning opportunity, a good learning experience for me, because I had to figure out how I learned, right? Because it wasn't just everything didn't just come easy when I got to college. So it was definitely a big reality check for me, for sure.
And I guess I'm curious, how did you cultivate figuring out how you learn? Because I feel like in that environment, there's not like people really to kind of give you a hand unless you go out and really ask for it, or like you seek resources that are there to sort of support your educational journey. But if you're not out there, or if you're not even aware of them, it can be a very like isolating, struggle to just like, brute force getting your engineering degree by yourself. But how
hmm
did you go about sort of figuring out how you learn and, getting the support you needed to make it through the program?
So what I did was like I did a lot of work with people, like so we bouncing off from each other in study sessions, just like actually doing the problems, right? And going to office hours helped out because I had to learn. I think people learn at a different pace, like I was like, okay, when it comes to actually studying, you can't get it just like that, right? You need to read. Along with reading, you need to look at a video about it. Along with doing the video, you have to actually do the problem, right? So it's like had to learn in many different ways. And I found that I was best like hands on, like actually doing it, right? You learn the best by experience. And so that's how I kind of like navigated that space, trying to figure out how I was gonna like really get through, college and learn well.
I feel it. I feel it. And then what made you decide or like land on IOE? Because at least like I didn't even know IOE was an engineering degree. And a lot of the time, like I feel like IOE gets, kind of the shitty end of the stick in terms of like it's funny, like within engineering, sort of the hierarchy of perceived value of like different engineering degrees. And
hmm
a lot of the time they'll be like, like your chemis and your EEs, they're at the top of like the most psycho obsessed nerds in the world, because there's no like studying those degrees is like putting yourself through personal misery. And then it
hmm
sort of like gets nice, and then they're like, well, you reach IOE and it's like, they're like, oh, they're for people that want to study business. But it's like business is a part of engineering. We can't, like, as much as we have to think about the systems and how they're built, that's not useful if you can't think about the actual structures of building that at scale and thinking about like actually creating yield and like what does it mean to have quality, other than just
hmm
designing something that's cute. And I think
Right.
like that's where IOE really shows its power and flex because you don't really get that in like the other, engineering degrees. But I'm curious, like, what did you know that that was what you wanted to land on when you first got there? Or was it sort of like an explorative journey throughout the years at Michigan before you figured out, like, what IOE is really what speaks to me, I mean, how my brain works. And I really feel like I can have that impact, that you were talking about through this type of engineering as opposed to like one of the others.
Yeah, so IOE kind of was the thing that clicked the most. I have a very entrepreneurial mindset, and I think in like org structures. I think like very futuristic, holistic type of view, and I just like from like freshman year, we had those engineering 101 classes, right? Those introductory courses that kind of let you get a piece or get a little taste of what certain engineering disciplines are. So I did like the solar tracker one, and that was like heavy on like ME, very like coding based, and I was just like, yeah, you know what, this ain't clicking with me, right? But then I was able to like take some like IOE courses, and it was talking about like the value of money, and then it talked about kind of like ordering quantities, like that 202 economic decision making, like basically whatever like classes that was like introductory IOE courses. Those are the things that I was like, oh, I get this. Like I'm very business oriented, right? When I was growing up, I used to like sell candy. I used to try to like make bread. I try to do a lot of stuff to make money. So
I
when I
mean,
saw that,
Mike's Chicken and nothing. You
you
had a
feel
lot of
me?
your little ventures. I feel you. I feel
You feel
you.
me? So I was like, this is just, it makes sense to me, right? I resonate with this the most. So that's what made me think about like, okay, I can do IOE. I'm great with like business, like business concepts, and I love optimization, like just trying to improve and do stuff better. So I was always about trying to do better, be better, like personally, or like being better in the field. So yeah.
And I guess for like people that don't really understand like what is the like what do you gain from having a degree? Like what is the perspective that you leave with once you have like a degree in IOE? Can you sort of explain like sort of the framework that now you can think of from like an entrepreneurial aspect, but really thinking about like the process and the system that result in that output? How sort of IOE helped you build that framework that, you can now use for tackling a breadth of different types of things?
Yeah, I think I would really prepare you to go into any field like engineering, right, or any industry, because it's the mindset, it's that continuous improvement mindset that you get, and while you're also learning, you also understand like the business aspect about it. Like one thing that they really emphasize is ROI, so like return on investment. So like, if stuff is even worth doing this, like you learn like just like thinking like far ahead, get into strategic planning, and IOE just kind of sets you up to be a part of any business function, because like you're going to be able to say, okay, I can evaluate what's going on now, take this, and I can tell you like where you're going to be, like where the business is going to go in the future, right? So it's good with planning and thinking about strategy. And so yeah, basically like IOE just kind of like it sets you up to be in any industry, because you know like engineering, right? You understand the engineering basics, you feel me? But then you also understand the business part about it. So
Yeah, it's very important, I think, especially if you want to create anything, you really need to understand like, is it even worth doing? Is this something worth pursuing? And like, where are we trying to go? Because, like, at least for me, that's something that I think a lot about is like, even as in our society, like, where are we trying to go? You know what I mean? Like, what are our goals and why are we trying to get there as opposed to somewhere else? And I feel like I don't see enough discussions around that, especially with like our resource management and like where we're trying to just go with like just the human civilization. Is it just to, keep on trudging along, working, making things, but not really filling the void of, like why are we making these things, like and I feel like a lot of the time, like, I don't know, in capitalism, everyone's like, oh, well, for money. Yeah. But to me, like, business is only useful because it serves people, right? Like, it's like us
mhm.
being servers to our communities. And I'm, interested in like understanding more about your perspective of, you know, just life in general. Cause I know, like, despite growing up in the Midwest where, maybe there isn't opportunities to be exposed to a breadth of different just like life philosophies. I know at
Hmm.
Michigan, we really did have the chance to really figure out alternative ways of finding value and understanding like the intersectionality of like different factors that influence our societies and our civilization, and the things that we should be prioritizing. And at least I sort of left with this more deepened awareness of like the importance of community, the importance of the environment, the importance of like understanding who we are as just conscious beings and have that influence our voice as engineers and creators. I'm curious, yeah, like sort of how you look at this sort of perspective of having purpose in our society, and just like how engineering has helped you facilitate that in just like the work that you do.
Really, I would say my perspective shifted in college. Right, we were in a big melting pot of ideas, cultures, backgrounds, and that was just, like the best thing for me because it was like able to, like you said, help you shape who you are. Figuring out who you are is a life journey, and that was like the start of that journey for me. Because prior to, I was kind of like living this narrative of like the black kid coming from the hood, right? That's like the one that makes it out and to go out and do whatever, you know. And but I'm like, I go to college and then I see how like you can really go out and live life, right? Go into business, get into the workforce, but that's at the end of the day is to supplement your pockets, but it's not supplementing like your heart or supplementing like your passion or my passion, right? I saw that like leaving my home, which really was community, right? Founded on family, founded on morals of like love, you feel me? Founded on like just really love, right? Right. So it's like I left out of there and then I moved on to see like it really wasn't like all of this that we were working towards, like just trying to supplement our pockets, you know, is pushing, like trying to make money and whatever that they really don't mean like nothing to me, right? I kind of like want to go back and be a part of my community just to like to help people and like help them grow and to get to a position where they can like actually learn and who they are. A lot of times, some people like caught up in home situations where they really just can't learn who they are because they always got to work to supplement, do for their family, you know, just to survive, to keep the lights on, you know. And so I'm grateful that I had the chance to go out and just like learn that I'm a very loving being. Like I preach all the time, kind of just like peace, you feel me, and then strength and peace, because there is a lot of strength in just like kind of like learning that like you know what, at the end of the day all this chaos is going on, right? There's a lot of negative things that happen in the world, like you can just go out there and pick whatever one you want, you know, but it's like kind of navigating through that and finding like you know peace and harmony with yourself and like activities that you love to do, like being connected to nature. um, so my worldview shifted from just kind of like grinding, trying to get this money so I can get my family in a better situation to how can I just like find peace and be able to be happy in the moment, happy with whatever's going on, right?
How have you been able to cultivate finding happiness in the moment? Because I think, like you said, a lot of the time our egos are caught up in this, like, I need to grind, I need to make money, I need to be successful, I gotta be on that Forbes list. I'm trying to be billionaire. I'm trying to, be this tech mogul, represent for my community, do great things, break ceilings. But when you're like sometimes so focused on that
Hmm.
destination that we sort of fabricate, in our minds, like this fantasy of like this success that we need to reach, it robs us of like all of the small little joys that we get to experience in the moment of like, it's the fall time and the trees are changing color, and that's so beautiful because it's so vibrant, and it's like nature's letting you know like, yeah, it's cooling down now, like we should be going within ourselves, getting grounded. But when we're like caught up on like, no, 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 I need to grind, I need to make money, I need to feed my family, I got to do, all of these things. It takes us away from like being able to connect, and be in the moment because we get so caught up
Hmm.
in like the future, the future, the future, or like crap, I've, messed up in the past. And you rob yourself of like the present, which is like the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that even exists. And yet we like it's like we're trained like just like, when we're in high school of like trying to be ambitious and having to prove ourselves to be somebody so that we can fit in our communities. It like robs us in this weird way of like actually being able to enjoy the life that we have, which is like to me like the most beautiful part is like we get this opportunity, but how many of us are really like taking it in for all that it's worth and not just getting this sort of shallow experience of like what it means to be alive, that by the end you're like, "Oh my god, like I didn't even like what did I do? I have stuff, but like what is it? It means nothing when I'm about to die in a couple hours. Like where is that everlasting impact of like the touch that you have when you influence your community and you see that impact of like even you were saying like your principal, like, he's just trying to help kids grow, but by him, being in your community, being passionate about, having a positive impact, he touched your life and, like, allowed you to be able to see things that you wouldn't have otherwise seen, which now unlocks doors that you probably wouldn't have never had because it, like, puts you, in this framework of, like, "Oh, I can be something more," but when we're caught up in, like, our individual stories, it's like we forget that it's not just about us, it's everything, and like I think it we put so much burden on ourselves in that way too of like it has to be all on me. When it's
Right.
like, no, you have a community. Like that's why they're
All
there.
right, so yeah, my perspective on that
Yeah.
is like sometimes I sit and think I'm like, what made me who I was, right? Like, what was the ingredients that God put together to make me come and realize like a lot of stuff like in an early age. Like, I think like it's just like who I was, like my being. Like I'm an old soul, right? I feel like I've been here before, and I was able to learn like lessons of life quicker. And I look at like those instances, like near death experiences, right, that we all may have, and going through traumas, and be
Mm,
like, oh my gosh, like I'm still here, like I'm still here, and the fact that we're just like witnessing life itself is just a beautiful thing. One quote that I always like kind of think about is like, or one statistic is like, you made it out of like, like you're one in like a trillion chance of being born. You feel me? Like that in itself is just like wow, like and I'm here,
exactly.
or like one time I overheard one of my brothers talking. He was like, "Hey man, keep your head up because if you got your head down all the time, you gonna miss out on the world, right? You're gonna miss out on just like seeing stuff, or and just like seeing how we're blessed in so many different ways. You feel me? Like there's many of situations where people just like they just don't have what you have, right? And even if like you're in a position, somebody might be in a worse position than you, and so that's like also like about how I'd be graceful. I mean grateful, and I appreciate the moments. But then also one thing I like, appreciated was like my experiences with like psychedelics, right, and stuff like that. Like that kind of opened my perspective to being more inept, like in tap with nature, learning about like frequencies, learning about like tapping into that energy, and realizing what this feeling is, this feeling of like being, like just being in itself. I always was a very motivated, happy kind of like, hey, it's okay. Like even if you're like trying to motivate, uplift people, I was always that person. Even as a kid, like I was giving, I helped a lot. I was emotional. I felt a lot. I'm a very emotional person, and I see how like that really taps into like you. Like it's there's something more than like the physical, right? And so I see like
Mm.
through that what makes you feel that way, how can I take this feeling and what makes me get this feeling and how can I put that feeling out. And so that's why like I just try to like do everything that kind of makes me happy or like make other people happy, but also there's nothing wrong with like experiencing other emotions, right, because we're beings. And that's what I recently learned that like everything like and taking everything in is in itself is just like is blissful, right? So one thing I don't want to be like going to rants, but another thing is my friend,
No, I feel you. I go on rants all the time, man. It's all
yeah,
good.
my friend Chris, he introduced me to this book. It said like peace is in every step, right? Because I had this thing where like when you achieve
Thich Nhat
something,
Hanh, I feel
yeah,
you.
when like you achieve something, right? So like for me, I won a robotics competition. We were the first all black drive team to win a robotics competition in high school. We did that. I was like, okay.
Gang, gang. I
I was
feel
like,
it.
I was like, okay, what's next after this? All right, and then all right, I graduate high school. I go to college. I'm in college. I get my degree. I did that for my grandmother. My grandmother told me she wanted to be the first. I was a, first generation student, so I did that. I graduated, and after that, I was like, "Shit, what's after this?" You know. And so I was trying to figure out what's after this. What's after this? Am I satisfied? Am I just keep trying to reach something? Reach something? I'm like, I don't want to keep doing that, right? I'm like, you know what? Even though it's not something, it could be something after that. It's like I'm good with what it is now, right?
No, I honestly like everything you said definitely resonates, cuz like I totally feel it of like trying to figure out who you are in like this weird complex place and understanding that there's more than just the physical. I think that is like such a just an awakening moment in it of itself just to recognize that it's more than just the physical and like what makes our being like how do we create this identity of self and like what are the layers that sort of construct this facade that we scaffold our egos to that say this is me and this is not me. It's such an interesting thing. And it's interesting because I've been really focused on this idea of like community because like at least I've been trying to figure out like why do I feel sort of this like separateness from my environment, and I realize like in my meditation group, I try to, be vocal and share how I feel so I can grow, which is difficult because it's like being vulnerable and like sharing things that you would rather just keep to yourself. But it's like just dealing with the anxiety of like the reason that I'm so obsessed with like trying to understand like the origins of our consciousness is really because it's like I'm trying to validate like my experience of self and like this separateness that I feel and the anxiety that I get from that separateness when it's like I want to be a part, like there's this like deep internal need of wanting to be a part of something. And I recognize it's like the community, and like our whole lives like we're told that we're like a separate person, we're an individual, we have an individual self, we're independent, we make our own decisions, we are in control, we can do it all by ourselves, we don't need anybody, like you got you, it's you yourself, and they're like when you're dead all you have is yourself, like and it created this narrative in my head of like, "Oh, damn, like I can only depend on myself, which means I have to do everything myself, which means all of my ideas have to come from myself." And like it puts this burden of separation on like who we are as people. And I realized I was like, "Damn, like Harsha, why do you need to be separate? Like why is this like need for isolation like so ingrained in like everything that you do that it has to be like you?" And I realized it's because that's what I was told my whole life that like I had to be an individual. And if I depended on anybody, that would be weakness. You know what I mean? Because you can't depend on them because you only got yourself. But it's like from the day we're born, we get our identity of self because of our community. We don't give that identity to ourselves. It's given to us as a gift of this realm that we're in, this community. From the name that we're given from the day we're born to like the color of our skin and the narratives that we are told of the stories of the people that came before us that created this identity that we now like have to play into is so powerful. But yet we're always told like, no, you're an individual, like it's all on you. But it's like, no, like literally everything about who we are and what makes us who we are and where we get validation comes from our community. And it's like to be told that you have to be an individual when like it's impossible. When like our literal community, whether it's our human community or like biosphere community, we are all connected. And like when you realize like you don't have to do it all by yourself, it takes off this weight of like, damn, like I don't need to be so hard on myself because like I have a community that supports me, that is there and will help sort of like me figure out the things that I don't know because I cannot do it all by myself. And it's like having that support. And it's funny because it shows up all the time, the benefits of being a part of a community where it's like even when like I can order food, takeout so I don't have to cook. That's me depending on my community, you know what I mean, to be there to support me. Like when it comes to even figuring out what I'm interested in, a lot of that is through what others in my community have explored. I can learn from their journey and decide, does that resonate with me? And then from there be like, okay, I want to be a part of that. And just like you said, going back to like who we are and the narrative of like our ancestors and the work that they've had to overcome, and like just even understanding like what were they curious about though? Like what were the things that got them passionate about life and like does that show up in me? And it's like it does. It's like in my DNA of like loving nature, loving agriculture, loving people, loving this like wanting to be a part of our tribe that is empowered because we all understand the value of being in a tribe. Like we don't all have to do
Hmm.
everything. Like you have your partners that can pick you up when you're, when you're down and like support you in the areas that you're weak so that collectively you are stronger than you ever would have been by yourself. Like to me, I don't know. It's been something that's just been like an epiphany but also humbling moment for my ego of like I don't have to be everything. Like I have a community that's got me. Why am I not feeling comfortable enough to give them the space to support me? You know what I mean? Just like I'm trying to create space to support them. Why am I not giving them space to support me? And then it's crazy because it's like, but you have, you know what I mean? Like when it's like when you go to schools and you have teachers and you have mentors and you have peers and you have friends that all like influence your perspective and how you look at the world. And like that is your community supporting you. But there's like always this resistance of like, well, I can't share that because and then I'm too emotional, or I can't say that because then my community is going to judge me. And it's like, no, like we need to be so in tune with who we are and understand the value of our
Hmm.
community that like we can have this like flow, and only then do you really create opportunities to like grow as a person and really tap into like your dharma and your purpose of like why am I here, what can I really do that's unique and can really help my community grow. But you can't do that if it's like you are in your own echo chamber all the time. Like it's just like it makes you freaking crazy. You know what I mean? And so yeah,
Hmm.
like I don't know. I'm curious what you think about that. Because yeah, I've noticed like community is so 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 important. But like it's like we tell ourselves we're too strong to have community. You know what I mean? And we're too tough. We don't need it. But that's a lie of the ego. It's a lie of like this narrative of like we had to be the strong individual. And it's like maybe I don't want to be strong right now. Maybe I just want to be supported, feel grounded.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I know, I've seen that like humans, we don't really like to do stuff where it's out of our control. We like to do stuff that we can control the outcome for. And when you see like if everything is all on you, right? Then you just like, okay, this is because of me, right? And I know that something's gonna happen. Just like outside of that, like I ain't gonna worry about it because it's not in my control. But basically, like you said, like part of that ego is like telling us that like we all have to be independent, right? And preaching that from a young age is really detrimental to kind of like the narrative of community. And I feel as if like community is like really the reason why we are able to get to where we are today, right? That's why we're able to sit here
Exactly.
and have this conversation is because people came
Exactly.
together and they worked on it together. And like even us, like our friend, our friendship, like our group of friends, like we support each other so much, and I've seen how like that has helped us grow in ways that like I wouldn't have thought, right? So that it's that bouncing of ideas, it's that sharing of experiences, it's that coming together, and it's the feeling like community gives purpose because you got to think about like, okay, yes, you are an individual, like there is originality in you,
Exactly.
right? Because no one else is gonna be you, right? You are
Yeah.
you,
You have your
but you
collective
have to
of
be that,
experiences that shapes your lens, and will always be unique forever.
right? And but that you're just a part to a whole, right? You're one like link in the chain of this whole machine that's going round and round, right? And so like when you try to like separate yourself out of that, then you're throwing off like the rhythm of what needs to happen for like stuff to just like to grow, right? Because like a plant just ain't gonna grow from itself. A plant needs the sun. A plant needs water. You feel me? It needs nutrients from the ground, from the soil, and like looking at that, like there's more than just one thing in here that contributes to whatever happens, like just like growth in general. So I've seen that this like community gives purpose, and I just had this conversation with my friend Charles. I'm like, you know what, bro? Like I'm out here, although like yes, it's very surface level that I'm not necessarily in a spot where I see people that look like me, but I'm just not in a part or in a place where I feel like I'm a part like in my community, right? Because we have our community, people or like things that just like resonate with me, and I just don't resonate in this space, right? I want to get back to where like stuff that like defined my identity growing up, being in an impoverished community, being in a place where we don't necessarily have resources, but yet we make it with what we have. We innovate
That
and we do
resilience,
what we have to do
yeah.
to get to survive,
Yeah.
right? I like that's what resonates with me. Like not necessarily having it all, but still making it. You feel me? With a small amount, right? And like and what's the opposite of surplus? Scarcity, right? And
Mm.
scarcity, right? So I resonate with that, right? So I want to be in a like well, essentially like we're all one, so we're all a part of this the community, like the human race, and so knowing that, boiling that down, figuring out like okay, within that, where am I going to be able to still thrive in my community? I'm still kind of working on that too, like you said, like figuring out like my purpose in community for real. So I think moving back home will definitely help me like concrete my role inside the community.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm excited to see what you do for sure because I know like community, especially in regions like that, they need to be developed and cultivated. You know what I mean? I think a lot of it is like giving the energy back to people that have been sort of disempowered or don't have any means or like role models within just their surroundings that allows them to break out of this like narrative of like it has to be all on me and I have to survive and I have to be the strong figure. Because like one of the things that irritates me, about the narratives that are perpetuated about the Black community specifically is that we always have to be strong. We always have to be overcoming
Mm-hmm.
obstacles and trauma, and we have to be breaking ceilings. And I'm like, that is exhausting. Okay. Like, I'm so sick of it. I'm like, can these people just relax for once? Like, can our purpose just to be vibe and to have good energy and just to be, able to just be content. Like why does it always have to be like this group has to be grinding, to achieve something instead of just being able to be content with where we are? Because I mean, I think like diversity is so important in any community, but I think diversity we often look at, especially in America, through this very like singular lens of race, you know what I mean? Or like
Mm-hmm.
religion or like sexual preference or like gender identity. Like they want to look at it through this like one-dimensional lens of like what diversity means. But to me, like the human experience is diversity at its finest. Like even two people that look the same share commonalities, whether it be racial, religious, what their preferences are. There's still going to be diversity just because like everyone is cut from a different like kaleidoscope of experiences that's shaped by like where they were born, the experiences that they have, the environments around them, what they are exposed to. That naturally breeds diversity. But we never talk about that. It's always like, well, diversity of groups, but then to me that's so like limiting in just our ability to express ourselves as people because like even within the Black community there's a lot of stereotypes about what it means to be Black and like how to define our Blackness and how Black people are supposed to act and like if you don't listen to this type of music, like how could you be Black? Or like, oh, like this music is just for Black people or these experiences are just for this group. And I'm like, no, like we all are different, we all have different tastes. And to me, whatever, it doesn't matter like what you gravitate towards just because you have this sort of melanin. That is automatically justification for that to be an acceptable Black experience, right? But it's often like they want to put blinders on like how you're allowed to fluctuate in your experience, which to me is so unfair and so limiting to people when like our humanity is this gift that allows us to explore. We have diversity of this emotional experiences, but we often hyper focus on happiness as being the one that we need to sustain and we need to achieve. And like you said, we need to be able to experience all of them and just be able to be with all of them because they each have something to teach
Mm-hmm.
us. Like anger shows us boundary, it shows us pain, it shows us trauma. You know what I mean? Jealousy shows us like where we're grasping, clinging, and wanting. You know what I mean? Like fear shows us where we have room to grow, and happiness shows us things that just express and bring up love, bring up excitement, bring up curiosity. But it's like when we just focus on happiness, sometimes I'm like, well, that robs you of just being able to be human and to just explore and figure out what your life is for you without it having to be sort of defined in these like boxes. Um, but it's like, yeah, often we like think our communities only have to look one way when I'm like, we can have multiple communities. Like to me, there should be infinite number of communities that we can be a part of and contribute to without it being sort of like a singular thing because of narratives that like other people put on us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say like being a black male in America is definitely like you don't really know about those biases until like you experience that and you just like grow up, right? And so one thing I thought about like with like particular to the black experiences, right, with race is just like injustice and that kind of like play a role in how I look at the world and but still knowing that like that is basically like a construct, not a construct, but basically like something that we ourselves we made this issue right because we want to have a hierarchy over people because of like the one commonality of a group of people with their skin, but that's not necessarily the best thing to like utilize in terms of just like us being a collective. So I don't really appreciate like all of the racial biases that that we have against people and stereotypes, you feel me? My friends would tell you, I always used to say like, what is normal, right? What is this normal? Why do we have to like kind of like generalize everything and make it this one thing? Whatever, like we like you said earlier, we live in a complex world, like this complex thing like of life that we call, and and it's like knowing that it doesn't have to be like everything. It doesn't have to look the same or be the same itself. Kind of like pushed me to not really care about kind of like living to be this typical image of like a black person, right? Because I always say like I had alternative perspective. Like I didn't necessarily like always listen to rap music, right? I grew up listening to dubstep, EDM. You feel me? I like sad boy music, R&B. You feel me? But just not just like rap, hip hop. It wasn't my thing, right? Uh, a lot of people like I dance, I smile a lot. You feel me? A lot of black men feel like they gotta have this like hard face and just like keep this dominant exterior, but uh you can let down your guard at times. Although, yes, we do live in a world where that's necessary, right? You live in a world where you have to play a role, you feel me, just to survive. But you just got to figure out when and where can I like let down my guard and just like express joy, express happiness, right? And not have everything associate with the biases and norms that other people like to place on you. And so
Yeah.
it's always someone else just throwing their judgments at you or throwing their expectations of what your life should be. But it's like, nah, man, I'm just trying to be me because, through my experiences, I figure out who I am and what I resonate with. So like, I'm not this person. So
No, I think that's so beautiful. Just because, like, it's been interesting. I've been trying to figure out, like you said, like who am I, right? Like, what am I? And it was funny. Like our meditation instructor asked, like, "Are you your body? You know, like, is your body who you are?" Like, and it was like it was from the lens of like, well, yes and no. Like your body is sort of this thing that you move around, but you're not thinking about like all of the cells that contribute to you to be able to have this body, all like the microorganisms that live in your gut that allow you to digest food so that you can have the vitamins that you need to have this body. And like those things they grow and they die, you know, through their own natural cycles, and they're not holding on to this attachment of like I'm a cell and I need to be here for eternity. No, like they're going through their natural flow to support your growth. And it's like interesting sometimes when I feel like our identities that we cultivate, you know, through just like the things that we hear in our society, the uses of language and how that sort of creates narratives in our head, we get so like fixated to like our bodies as like the vessel of self. But it's like when you really look deeper than that, you're more than your body, and you're actually like have depth to your experience that you're not even aware of because you're like looking at life from this narrow lens of like I, instead of like when you take a step back and you really just observe your experience, you observe sort of like the sensitivities that we are in tune with, whether it be light, sound, tactile, and like thoughts. Um, you realize that there's like someone else peering behind the looking glass that's looking through life from your eyes, from your lens. And everybody has that person that's peering. And then you wonder like who is that person that's peering? And then you're like, "Oh my god, that's the one." And you're like, brain meltdown. You're
Yeah,
just
you
like,
feel
"Oh
me?
my gosh, what?" It's there, and you can see it. You can like everybody can see it, and that's like the crazy thing. It's not like something that a priest, is holding in the temple that only the priest can know. Like this is an aspect of our nature that everyone can see. But like because we get so accustomed to like what we see on the outside, which is so funny because like as engineers, like and scientists, the thing that we value is objective reality. But we never take like the tools that we use to study objective reality and flip it and look within our subjective experiences because we say like, oh, our subjective experiences are our own, they don't matter, they're not quantifiable, therefore we cannot, study our subjective experience. But it's like you totally can. And like for me, meditation is the way in which we study our subjective experiences and like gain deep insight from it. And one of them is the idea of impermanence, the idea of oneness that really brings back this like concept of like community and that we are a part of, like you said, like that link in a chain, like, and that chain will only be strong if each link understands its purpose, if each link understands its power, if each link understands its role, then like that link will be so strong that nothing can break it. We're like in this weird time where our links are just they rusting, they low key not holding, they holding together, but
Yeah.
it's like I think we need to reinforce here. But I feel like through conversations like this, like it can kind of at least give people a place of curiosity from which to look within themselves and realize like, oh my god, like I am a part of this community, and like what do I want to do with it? What do I want my sort of my flavor, my mark to be to really improve the strength of the chain, instead of worrying so much about my one link, you
Hmm.
know?
I feel that. Well, one thing I wanted to say was like you were talking about the cell, right, and how they just like, yeah, within you, they're like, you know, uh, growing and dying at the same time. And what thing that came to me was just like that kind of resembles change, right? And like without death, there's like without death, there would be no life. Without life, there would be no death, right? There's this part of the whole with yin and yang to find a balance, to find harmony. And so I look at that, right? So that's why I always try to take the good and the bad in my experiences. I try to be okay with like stuff going wrong, right? Because that's a learning opportunity. It's not the end, and even like death itself is still not the end, right? Because like you said, we think about our body and this physical thing, this animate thing, but like this, although this shell will one day like be gone, I will leave behind like ideas. I will leave behind like experiences, memories, right? I will leave behind emotions, those inanimate things, right? That we are like just like think about as concepts, but that's like a huge contribution to like the living experience, like
Mm.
everything outside of the physical. And so I admire you in like your meditation practices, like because for me I meditate, and when I do meditate it is to kind of like get out of this space of reality and to just kind of like feel what like what a boundaryless experience might be like, right?
Mm.
And so just to let myself kind of like flow through space and just like resonate, because when I do meditate, the things that I think about is love, I think about healing, and how did that feel, and what does that not necessarily look like, but it just like really like how does it, I don't want to tie it to a feeling, right? Because a feeling can also be physical,
No, but what
but
is the sensation?
right, the
Yeah.
sensation of it.